When you make a mistake, you don't have to stay stuck. Instead, you can focus on how to take positive steps to repair any damage and strengthen the relationship with your kids or stepkids, even after you've said or done something that's hurtful.
Yep.
This really is an important topic, and it's something you don't want to avoid or neglect.
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your step family from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of step family life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Hey everyone, we are so glad and grateful to be joining you again today.
Yes.
And we want to give a quick thank you to one of our listeners over on Apple Podcasts who recently gave us a review. And they shared that they're thankful that we dive deep into real life blended family issues. Now, this user's name over on Apple Podcasts was Artsy Jam. I love that. And she goes on to say, my husband and I get so much out of the podcast. Thanks and keep up the hard work. We blended families need all the support. So thanks for your encouragement, Artsy Jam. We really appreciate that. And if you're joining us today, but you haven't left us a rating or a review just yet, would you take a few minutes to do that? We would really, really appreciate it. And another thing that you might consider is reaching out on our share page over at the website. You can just go over to www.mikeandkimcoaching.com/share to ask a question or suggest a topic, and we'll see how we might be able to support you right here on the podcast. In fact, today's episode is a result of a listener using that share page to connect with us.
That's
isn't it,
right,
honey?
yep. One of our listeners, we'll call her April, which isn't her real name, but she knows who she is when she hears this episode, right? Anyway, April reached out to us and she shared what she referred to as a huge hurdle that she's been facing in her blended family. Here's what she said. I said some careless, hurtful words to my stepdaughter about her mother. I regret every word I said, and it's obviously affected our relationship. My question is there any coming back from this? I have apologized several times and called myself out that I was wrong and should never have allowed myself under any circumstance to say anything about her mother. And I've been very careful about everything I say and do, especially in regards to her. We are cordial with each other and have grown in some ways despite this mistake, but there is still this severe distance that I wish to heal and make better. Any advice would be wonderful.
Wow. First, we just want to say thank you, April, for reaching out and for sharing so honestly with us. You know, we're always happy to offer what we can to help you move past these hurdles. And the truth is, all of us face huge hurdles of one kind or another throughout that blended family journey. So thanks for your courage and just for your trust in us to support you.
Absolutely. And you know, April, you're not alone in this challenge. What you describe is something many of us face in blended family life. And it's not just a step-parent struggle. It's a struggle every parent will probably come up against, because whether you're a bio or a step-parent, you can't be perfect and have it all together all the time. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. We're all going to make mistakes that will negatively impact our relationship with the kids and potentially create some setbacks. And later on, I'll share one of my most regretful parenting moments with my daughter, Annika. But before we get there, I just want to encourage you. When you make a mistake, you don't have to stay stuck. Instead, you can focus on how to take positive steps to repair any damage and strengthen the relationship with your kids or stepkids, even after you've said or done something that's hurtful.
Yep.
And if you've got a bit of a knot in your stomach just getting this far into the episode, it's okay. You're in the right place here today. This really is an important topic, and it's something you don't want to avoid or neglect. Just think of how great it's going to feel when you get to the other side of the hurdle.
That's right.
When this kind of situation occurs, one of those imperfect parenting moments, and the relationship with one or more of the kids gets strained, you want to engage, not disengage, even if it's really difficult for
man,
you.
that is right. When April reached out to us, she asked this question, is there any coming back from this? Well, we believe that the answer to that is yes, absolutely. Now, it's going to take some intentional effort and maybe even some difficult conversations. But really, it sounds like April's already begun taking those steps forward, and she's willing to continue. And that's great. We want to commend you for the efforts you've already taken, April, and for all of us to manage that kind of challenge. We might also need to overcome some personal barriers. And we're going to talk a little bit about that throughout the episode. Yeah. But for now, let's just dive in, and we want to explore some possible ways to repair and restore relationship after we've messed up and there's been some damage or disconnection with one or more of the kids. The first critical action step, it's one that April pointed out that she's already done. That's to own up to your mistake and offer a sincere apology. This is something that you want to do as quickly as possible. And for many of us, apologizing to our child or stepchild isn't always an easy step. So let's talk about why this can be so hard and how we can land on a healthy mindset around it.
Yeah. The truth is that not only do we know when we've crossed the line and messed up, but our kids know when we've blown it. Okay.
Yeah, there's no hiding it.
Now, we might feel tempted to just move on with life and pretend that nothing happened, just kind of excuse ourselves. Or we might even try to convince ourselves that the child is just going to get over it and we don't need to do any damage control at all. But unfortunately, there are a few problems when we choose not to own up to our own mistakes. First, we need to ask ourselves what our behavior is modeling to our kids.
That's a tough question.
Yeah, because so much of parenting is more about recognizing that things like honesty, integrity, authenticity, these things are caught, not necessarily taught.
That's right.
So if we want to raise kids that take responsibility for their own mistake and exhibit authentic honesty and integrity in their relationships, then we need to be modeling that behavior in a way that they can catch it and see what it looks like in real life relationships.
Yeah.
And kids don't just pick up the positive traits we exhibit.
What? Really?
No. The negative ones, like avoidance of problems, are traits that our kids will pick up on, and they'll emulate those things as well. So we really do need to consider what we're modeling and how that will impact our kids in the long run.
Yeah, I agree. And secondly, we need to weigh out the risks of our avoidance and decide if it's really worth it. Now, if our behaviors caused a relational damage of some kind with one of our kids or stepkids, and we know deep down that the child's been hurt in some way, we've got to ask ourselves, is avoiding it really worth the risk? In other words, are we willing to live with the frayed relational tension, knowing that we've caused hurt to this child? And are we willing to live with the long-term impact of avoiding it? Because whether we want to admit it or not, there is a risk here. We're risking ongoing resentment, lost trust, painful memories, all of those things that can create distance with our kids. These are just a few potential risks that can linger on for years or even a lifetime. Is it really worth the risk? Or maybe can we show up a little bit better?
Yeah, the bottom line is that our kids need healthy resolution, and so do we. We all need to experience honesty, vulnerability, and integrity in our relationships, and this means that we need to own it and apologize when we've made a mistake.
That's right.
Listen to this quote I found in an article from iMom. Blame and shame are never part of an apology. Instead, we need to own our behavior and ask for forgiveness. A sincere apology chisels out our pride, makes amends for hurt we've caused, communicates how much we love our children, and restores our relationship.
Yeah, man, what a great quote that is. And you know what? It actually highlights this next step for us, which is to seek forgiveness.
Yeah.
There's something really meaningful that happens between us and our child or stepchild when we apologize and then ask for forgiveness. It creates a new pathway for the relationship. Rather than getting stuck in the pain, we can find resolution and then move forward. And I really love the line that was used in there of chiseling out our pride.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about that because pride can be a huge barrier for us as parents and step-parents. And sometimes adults believe that admitting our faults to our kids means we're giving up our power. And our pride can keep us from being real and authentic with the kids. I know I've had lots of moments where I felt like I was the one who should be in charge and that I had the ultimate authority. So I'm the adult and I shouldn't have to explain myself, right? Man, but when I'm parenting out of that pride, that's when I'm starting to slip into the authoritarian style of parenting, kind of that dictator. And that doesn't allow for the warmth and connection that kids really need and that I actually really want in the relationship with the child. We're so excited to let you know about something brand new we've created just for you.
We've realized that with so many episodes available here on the show, it might feel a bit overwhelming to find the topics that matter most to you. That's why we've created a simple tool for you to receive a personalized playlist focused on your current struggle or your biggest challenge.
That's right. It's called the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz. You'll answer just a few questions, and based on your responses, we'll email you a curated custom playlist of episodes that are specific to you.
This simple quiz will direct you to the most impactful episodes that pertain to you personally and keep you on track in your journey of discovery, learning, and growth. So, scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this episode and click the link to take the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz today.
Okay, let's get back to the discussion.
You know, there's a common misconception that asking our kids for forgiveness shows weakness, but the opposite is true.
Yeah.
When we seek forgiveness, we're inviting our kids into the process of healthy reconciliation and deepening our connection with them.
Yeah.
Now, we aren't insisting that the child forgives us. We're simply seeking forgiveness here. Our kids have the option of forgiving us or withholding forgiveness, but most kids, you'll find, are really quite forgiving, and they want peace and harmony in their relationships. And it might take some time for them to forgive us, but kids will usually be moved to forgive after they've received a sincere apology and when they've been genuinely asked for forgiveness. And when we ask for a child's forgiveness, we're modeling an essential life skill here. All kids need to learn that everyone makes mistakes and that asking for forgiveness is essential, regardless of who you are or the context.
Yeah, that's right. You know, April described this really difficult interaction that she had with her stepdaughter regarding the bio mom in the other home, right? I remember a different context with Annika, your daughter from a previous marriage, where she was maybe 7 or 8 and we were in a parking lot at the grocery store and she was just throwing a fit and the van was open. And I remember climbing in the back and just jumping down her throat. I was really angry. I lost control. And I shouted at her. I was like right in her face. And I remember just how terrible I felt heading home. And it didn't take long where I had to approach her and just simply say, you know what, I messed up. I had to own it. And I asked for her forgiveness. And it was early in our relationship. And I was actually really surprised at how willing she was to forgive me. She was like, oh, it's okay. Like it almost like didn't impact her. But for me, it was like a huge deal.
Yeah.
And it seemed like not quite so huge of a deal to her. So it did clear the air. And it also helped me to see her side of the story and have a little bit of understanding from her as well.
Yeah. And you know, when we seek forgiveness, we don't necessarily have to get forgiveness back verbally from a child.
Yeah.
We're really just asking and hoping that they'll be able to forgive us, but we're not insisting that they verbalize, I forgive you.
That's right. I wasn't pounding my fist going, forgive me, forgive me, forgive me.
No.
That's right. But, you know, when we own our mistakes like that and we ask for forgiveness, we also want to be offering empathy and affirmation, which is really our third point.
Yes.
We talk a lot about this on the podcast, the benefits of emotion coaching our kids when they're hurting. And this whole empathy and affirmation is part of emotion coaching. But when we've caused the pain, it can be really challenging for most of us to pause and then initiate a conversation about how our words or actions have negatively impacted them. However, when we show up with genuine empathy, it can actually help the child to process in a positive way. And it lets them know that you really understand and you care about what they're experiencing. It makes them feel known, makes them feel heard, it makes them feel understood, which can be really powerful. It might sound something a little bit like this. And I'm just going to use an example that could fit with April and what she shared with us. Maybe April could use the opportunity to say, I want you to know that I feel awful about the hurtful things I said about your mom, and I'm sorry. I hope you can forgive me. So that's just simply owning the mistake.
Right. Calling yourself out.
Yeah. And really just apologizing and asking for forgiveness. Now, as the conversation continues, we want to keep affirmation and empathy at the forefront. So April might go on to say something like, I'm wondering if you might be willing to share how that made you feel. I'd really like to understand what you're going through. Now, the child might be open to sharing, and if they are, just listen with curiosity and kind of steer clear of expressing any judgment or getting defensive.
Yeah.
And also, don't shame yourself with comments like, oh, you're right, I'm such a bad stepmom or a bad stepdad. Right? That's not going to help either. That starts putting the focus on you.
Right.
What you want is the focus on them and drawing them out.
Letting them express.
Yeah. Now, after you've listened, you can simply thank the child for sharing and then give them some affirmation. I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I can see how hard it was for you and why my comments were upsetting for you. I think it's the right thing for me to treat your mom with respect.
Now, before you attempt any of this, you want to be sure that you're emotionally prepared for this conversation and that whatever affirmation you offer, that you can give that genuinely to the child.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Because, kids can sniff out insincerity a mile away.
Yep.
So it might actually be better for you to give it a day or two until you're able to offer heartfelt empathy and genuine affirmation around their experience and their emotions.
That's a great point.
Now, we don't know if April has had this kind of conversation yet with her stepdaughter. It's quite possible. But this step of drawing the child out and asking for their perspective can be a powerful way to clear the air and then move forward with mutual understanding as you help the child to process through their emotions and you both move forward together.
That's right. And that little pause Kim mentioned about, waiting a day or two, again, back to what we said at the beginning, this is not about avoidance.
No.
This is simply taking enough time to get yourself in the right place emotionally so that you can move forward together effectively.
It's got to be authentic.
Absolutely. Now, one thing April shared is that since the incident between her and her stepdaughter, she says that she's been very careful about what she says and does, especially in regard to the child's bio mom. Now, that's awesome, April. That's a really good move. And this might be something that can be verbalized to the child even after you've gone through the steps of apologizing, seeking forgiveness, and offering empathy and affirmation. So the fourth point is to simply clarify that you're going to make a conscious effort not to repeat this mistake again. And if you want to, and if it's appropriate, you could take a further step by considering giving the child permission to call you out on it if you do slip up in the future. So it might sound something like this. Hey, I want you to know that in the future, I'm going to be doing my best to speak respectfully about your mom. And I'm giving you permission to let me know if I say anything about her that's upsetting for you. Or, it makes you angry, or whatever it was that they shared about how that mistake might have made them feel. But again, make sure that you're ready and you're willing to really genuinely allow the child to hold you accountable. And of course, think through, what's their maturity level and what's your relationship like with them. This isn't really a blanket statement. You need to think about your unique dynamics. But it can be another powerful step in clearing the air and making your future intentions clear. But again, just be cautious with that and really think it through, only if it's appropriate in your unique situation.
All right, so we've considered a simple process of owning our own mistakes and moving toward repairing any relational setbacks that we may be experiencing as a result of our mistakes. And this process could be used by a bio parent or a step parent around any mistake. You know, when we lose our temper and we take it out on our child, or when we fail to follow through with a promise that we've made, when we violate our family's values or the code of conduct that we've established. Sometimes that happens. And, you know, if we want to be able to call out and correct our kids' infractions of our code of conduct, then we need to take responsibility for our own infractions as well.
That's for sure.
But let's just touch on why this can be so challenging within the context of blended families and step relationships. Listen to this from step family expert Sabrina McDonald. In traditional families, relationships form naturally, but in a blended family, it takes diligence, forgiveness, understanding, and the willingness to push through uncomfortable moments. For most people, we have a built-in tendency to avoid awkward situations, and that means withdrawing, leaving the room, remaining silent, and guarded during conversations. For a step parent to act this way, it comes across as cold, rude, and spiteful.
Now, that's pretty revealing, you know, because if it's true that our natural tendency as humans is to avoid or back away from awkward or uncomfortable situations, and I think we can all agree that that is the temptation,
No one
right?
likes that.
What's that unintentional message that we're sending to our stepkids then if we're doing that? You know, we certainly don't want to come across as cold, rude, or spiteful. But if we allow the silence to do the talking, what is actually being conveyed? You know, silence leaves the door open to misunderstandings. This is where family members can naturally jump to the wrong conclusions or make unfair assumptions.
Absolutely.
I've heard it said that in the absence of good information, as humans, we tend to fill in the gaps with bad information. That's true of our stepkids as well. So to avoid this from happening in your home, step parents, you need to be intentionally painting yourself in a better, more realistic light by just simply choosing to walk through the awkwardness of any of these mistakes and earnestly working through the process that we're exploring today. It's well worth it. I promise you. And look, there's going to be some mistakes. We can count on that. It's really an unavoidable reality because these dynamics are complex and you're most likely going to cause harm to somebody at some point in the blended family journey, even if it's unintentional. It can really create disconnection, but you don't have to let it in there.
No. And even when things feel really awkward or after you've made a blunder with a stepchild, continue to look for ways to connect with them.
Yeah, that's right.
Be determined to show interest in them and to show up well for them, regardless of all the messy relational stuff that might be going on. Don't shut them out or give up on restoring and building your relationship. You can also commit yourself to investing in learning the most effective ways to connect and create healthy bonds with stepkids. Even when it might feel like they've shut you out or that they've rejected you, there are a lot of things you can do to positively move forward and create connection.
Yeah.
You can start by exploring some possible ways to stay engaged and invested by going back to episode 39, which is called How to Create Strong Bonds with Resistant Stepkids. And we'll put a link in the show notes to that episode, as well as episode 37, that offers insights around why kids resist a step parent and how you can approach that resistant stepchild. And you might also want to check out episode 9, where we share an effective strategy to really elevate your status in the eyes of your stepchild. And you can check these out and search for solid resources from other reliable sources as well, so that you can continue learning and growing as a step parent. And you can resist the urge to back out of the relationship or allow that distance between you and your stepchild to grow.
Yeah.
Your genuine investment into their life will pay off down the road. So keep your eye on the bigger picture rather than avoiding or shutting down. Refuse to give in to the temptation of giving up on that relationship.
Absolutely. You've got to keep showing up. So we talked about how our pride can get in the way and how awkward, uncomfortable dynamics, especially in a blended family, can make this process really challenging.
Yeah.
But there's one more possible barrier that will make it difficult, if not impossible, to truly make amends and restore a damaged relationship with really anybody in your blended family, especially the kids. And that's our own unforgiveness. This can be a real struggle for step parents, but might also create a barrier for bio parents as well. And the reality is that our kids are going to act out in hurtful ways towards us at some point too. And they lack maturity, they lack self-control, and they can be insensitive and self-focused. This is pretty normal behavior for kids, actually. But when they say and do things that impact us negatively and make us feel unappreciated, misunderstood, or even angry, we can begin to internalize that pain, and then our own resentments grow and sometimes kind of take over the way that we're interacting with them.
Yeah. And there may be some very valid reasons why you feel resentment. And we've heard many painful stories over the years from parents and step parents about hurtful things that the kids have said or done towards them.
Sure.
And we don't want you to think that poor behavior should be overlooked.
Right.
Kids need to be held accountable for things like disrespect and poor choices. We've been talking about that over the last couple of weeks. But what we're talking about here is bitter seeds of unforgiveness that lead to building resentments towards your child or stepchild. And, we don't have time to go into this today, but if you think that you might be harboring some resentment towards a child, if you're still hurting, then we really encourage you to deal with that first before you move on with the steps that we've outlined today. Because kids can sense when there's an unresolved rift going on. They feel it. And it's going to be very difficult for you to approach a child in a sincere, empathetic mindset if you're still holding on to stuff and haven't truly forgiven them.
That's right.
So if that's where you're at, we encourage you to start working towards forgiveness. This is tough work, but it's well worth it. And to get you started, we've included a link to episode 64 called How to Set Yourself Free by Choosing to Forgive. And we've also included episode 47, How to Like Your Stepchild When You're Feeling Frustrated and Annoyed. And that one shares about how Mike moved beyond some of his resentments around Annika's behavior.
Yeah, that's right.
And one more thought on unforgiveness. This is another area where you do need to weigh out the risk. What's more important, the relationship with your child or pointing out who's right and wrong and holding on to a grudge and demanding an apology? You really have to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, and that can be challenging, But the bottom line with all the barriers is that as the adults, we're the ones with the fortitude and the maturity to kind of look beyond a child's hurtful behavior and choose forgiveness. We can show up well, even in the uncomfortable dynamics, and we can overcome our own prideful attitudes. You can choose to forge ahead in a positive direction, even when things might seem difficult and hopeless. You can always find a nugget of hope or an inspired idea, or make a mindset shift that'll help you to continue as you pursue a healthy, connected relationship with your child or stepchild. You might need to be patient. That's definitely a key. But perseverance and intentional effort can get you there.
Absolutely.
So let's just quickly review the action steps that we've outlined today, and then we're going to move on to one simple troubleshooting strategy. Okay, so step one, we're going to own that mistake and offer a genuine apology. Step two is that we're going to seek forgiveness. Step three is we're going to gain some understanding by asking how the child feels, and then offer some sincere affirmation around how your behavior might have impacted them. And then finally, step four is you're going to verbalize that intention to change and consider allowing the child to hold you accountable in the future if that's the appropriate thing to do. And remember that steps 3 and 4 should only be taken if you're emotionally ready and willing. So make sure your heart's in the right place before you initiate this. That's right. And we also talked about not allowing our pride to get in the way and staying the course even when things are awkward or if the child is a bit resistant. We want to continue investing, learning, and really remain engaged. And we may need to do our own work around forgiveness. If that resentment has kind of become a barrier in our relationship with the child, we need to work through that and deal with it.
Absolutely. But before we wrap things up today, I told you that I was going to share one of my imperfect parenting moments. And part of why I'm sharing this is to help you out with a simple strategy for those times when you might say or do something that you know you shouldn't have. And you know what? We've all been there. I know I'm not alone, bio parents and step parents alike. And when this happens, it can be difficult to know how to respond in a healthy way and do some on-the-spot damage control right there before things fester and get out of control.
Yeah.
Now, I have a very painful recollection of a time when I absolutely lost it on my daughter, Annika. And at this point in time, I was really struggling emotionally through our season of parental alienation. Her dad, my ex, had been negatively interfering with my relationship with my daughter in some really toxic ways. And Annika was caught in the middle, and she was acting out towards me. Honestly, this was a recipe for a perfect storm.
Yeah.
But I can't use that as an excuse for my own poor reaction.
That's right.
It seems that on our journey through the ups and downs of difficult blended realities, there almost always seems to be some kind of perfect storm a brewing, right? Especially around parenting and co-parenting. And when we struggle to cope, it's so easy to get carried away in that storm and react to our kids in ways that we immediately realize are not helpful and possibly are even harmful in our relationship with the child.
Yep.
So here's the scoop. Annika and I were in the car. I was feeling emotionally fragile. She was acting out. And in my frustration, I completely lost control. And I called her a really, really, really bad name.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed to even repeat it, especially because it's not the kind of language which it was actually a term of profanity.
Yeah.
It's not language that's typical for me,
Not
is it,
at
honey?
all. No. And we can't repeat it because I don't want to have to click the explicit button on this episode.
I was actually shocked by what came out of my mouth. And as soon as it came out of my mouth, I instantly felt horrible. I knew that I'd crossed a line that I never wanted to cross, and I was flooded with remorse.
Yeah.
But the fact was, I'd said it. And by the look on Annika's face, she was deeply hurt. Now, in that moment, I was at a loss as to how I should respond. I couldn't take back my words, and the moment was still so heated that I felt like nothing I could say or do would make things right. So thankfully, we still had a ways to travel in the car, and that gave me some time to process and decide how I was going to handle this situation. We were headed home, but I decided to take a detour and try and do some damage control by suggesting a do-over. Now, a do-over can be a good strategy when used in the moment to de-escalate the tension and quickly lead into the process that we just talked about. So I pulled the car over and into a mall parking lot, and here's what I said. Listen, honey, what I just said was something I wish I hadn't said. It wasn't okay. It feels like today we got off on a bad note, and I'm wondering if we can have a do-over and start fresh. And then I went on to apologize and ask for her forgiveness. Now, in this situation, Annika quickly softened. She accepted my apology and granted forgiveness. I think at that point, she also realized that her behavior towards me had crossed a bit of a line as well. She wasn't blatantly being disrespectful, but she was pretty prickly and rude. But there was no reason to push that at this point, right? I was dealing with my own stuff. Now, once I suggested a do-over, the stress between us lifted and we were able to start sort of, wiping the slate clean and start over. And thankfully, Annika has never brought up that incident since, which was one of my most painful and regretful parenting moments. Now, you might have noticed that I didn't give a bunch of reasons to her about why I snapped. I didn't try to explain or excuse or defend myself. I simply admitted it was wrong. I expressed my regret, and then I suggested a do-over.
Yep.
Now, I personally think it's better to keep things as simple as possible in these conversations. At that time, Annika was around, I think she was around 13 or 14 years old.
Yeah, probably.
And she was well aware of the stressful situation going on in my life. You know, kids are very observant, and in most cases, they already have a decent understanding of where you are at emotionally when you snap. They kind of get that. And I feel like offering excuses or getting defensive just muddies the water. What you really want is for the child to hear and focus on the sincerity of your regret and your apology. So really keep it simple. Simple is better, I think.
I agree with that. You know, so a do-over is something that you can try in the moment,
Right.
when it's really clear that you've just said something or done something hurtful or offensive. And
Right.
it's a great opportunity to just try to reset and then move forward from there. And if you can take action quickly, that'll help you to avoid misunderstandings from happening and then long-term disconnection from setting in.
Right.
So the sooner, the better. Right?
Absolutely.
Now, that doesn't mean, you know, like Kim said, she apologized, she asked forgiveness, she still had to show up with empathy and affirmation and all of that. All of that still applies, but this is a really quick way to respond in the moment. Now, to April, who's currently struggling with her stepchild, we hope this episode's been helpful. And if we've missed something, we'd love to connect with you for a free coaching call. And we extend that same invitation to all of our listeners because you probably have some very specific circumstances that could be going on in your home. Now, we know that no two blended families are the same, and so we'd love to connect and support you if that's something that you're interested in. So we'll have a link in the show notes that makes it really easy for you to just schedule a free call with us. And as always, we're so grateful to have you join us here on the podcast. You're going to want to join us next week as we head into February. And since February brings Valentine's Day with it, we thought we'd focus on blended family marriage. So make sure to come back next week and throughout February for that. But for now, that makes this episode a wrap.
Until next time.